All right. Hey, y'all. Is it too late for a cup of coffee? It's around 6:30 right now, and it's the end of the day here at Crossroads Country Store, and I had a funny story I wanted to share with you. Had a woman come in, and she made her way back here to the end of my store where I have my t-shirts, my Confederate t-shirts, and I heard like a yell, like, you know, a yell that somebody would make if they saw maybe a mouse or a spider or something caught them by surprise. And what scared her were the Confederate t-shirts, y'all. So, you know, supposedly my Confederate t-shirts are pretty scary. She made a pretty dramatic show of things, and you know, got all flustered and stormed out like she was just emotionally damaged and hurt. So this kind of stuff is a regular thing around here. So I found that kind of funny, but I wanted to make a video. I don't have any notes. I don't have anything necessarily in front of me. I have one thing I am going to read, but I wanted to talk about the document that everyone keeps bringing up. When I get into historical discussions with people, they always talk about Alexander Stephens' Cornerstone speech. And if you're not familiar with this, I'm just going to fill you in real quick. Alexander Stephens' Cornerstone speech supposedly was given down in Savannah, Georgia, and he talks about the foundation of the Confederacy being white supremacy and all these other things that people use that speech supposedly to define what the foundation of the Confederacy was. And if you read his entire speech, there's one point that I always mention to people, is that this speech, there was never really a written copy of it. It was reported by a journalist who wrote it down. Now, Stephens, the people alleged that what this speech meant, speaking of white supremacy and the Confederacy being formed on the basis of white supremacy, people brought that charge, you know, even when Stephens was still alive after the war. And he always said, Stephens always said in his writings too, that you can look this up, that his speech was misinterpreted. What he was trying to convey was that the formation or foundation, one of the foundations of the Confederacy, is no different than the foundation of the American Republic. And I always remind people that that same point, that racial view, which I would personally disagree with, but that racial view that Alexander Stephens believed at the time in the 1800s was very, very popular and very common. Actually, Abraham Lincoln himself believed these same racial beliefs. This racial rhetoric originated up north. You can look that up too. That's a fact. But one point I always bring up is a speech which Abraham Lincoln gave in the Lincoln-Douglas debates, September 18th, 1858. And in part one of the fourth debate, Lincoln says, actually, I do have a small excerpt of it in one of my pamphlets that I give out, but I do have a small section of it. I would suggest go read it yourself. But Abraham Lincoln said this in 1858. He said, "I will say then that I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races, and I, as much as any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race." So there you go. Abraham Lincoln's words. He was a white supremacist. He believed that. Now, most people back then, I would say, would agree with that. That was just the times back then. It doesn't mean that everybody who flies a Confederate flag or people who love the history from back then are believe those same things. But to make a case for Alexander Stephens' views, I think that to judge the Confederacy based off of this supposed speech of the exact words that he said, to base the entire Confederacy off that one speech is pretty far-fetched, because I think by the same rhetoric, you would then have to question the government of Abraham Lincoln and the rest of the people who probably thought the same way that he did back then too. Not only to mention that, but Jefferson Davis himself, in many of his other writings, mentioned other foundations of the Confederacy, like state sovereignty and the will of a people to govern themselves. So I don't think that it's fair for people to take this one speech and define the entire Confederacy because of it. So I would suggest digging deeper yourself into this. Like I said, Alexander Stephens refutes many people's claims, misinterpretations of what he said from back then. You can also look up Jefferson Davis's writings on what he said the foundation of the Confederacy was. And I would definitely suggest that you would look up the Lincoln-Douglas debates, September 18th, 1858, fourth debate, part 1 of Abraham Lincoln's statements concerning race. So I hope that this was a enjoyable video. This is Matt from ConfederateShop.com, and I hope you all have a good day. Bye-bye.